Good day, good day. I hope all is well. I am your humble host, JL Rilla. You are watching Informal Warfare here on the Titans of Liberty channel. Shout out Jason Lowe. I'm gonna get right into it. Today's title is called NATO's Command and Control of America. And in my research, I've studied that General Eisenhower was doing more than warning us just against the military industrial complex. But do you guys really understand what the military industrial complex is? Today we speak of the deep state and all of this stuff. But do you realize that when Trump was in office, he wanted to pull away from NATO or at least bring everything above board on the connections that America has with NATO? A lot of people do not know that General Eisenhower was the first supreme commander of NATO and also the supreme allied commander of the Europe forces or something like that. Today, what I have is a keynote prepared for you guys. I want to be quick with it um, so that I also made it available for a PDF and an HTML download so that you all can take this, source it, re-upload it, use it on your own, make your own podcast or informational teaching, whatever you want. It is sourced pretty good, but to be honest, I did a lot of Wikipedia, so it led me to a lot of different links. So I leave those links in the keynote. But before I get into that, I just want to thank God for another opportunity and another day. And I just hope that all is well with you all and that you are seeing the importance of being informed. And I just ask that God unite our hearts, unite our minds, and that He speak through me so that we can all get a solid understanding of what it is that He would have us to do in this time and in this what I would call dire emergency, because information is power, right? They say knowledge is power. Well, I heard Dick Gregory say, well, if I only give you limited information and that's the limit of your knowledge, then are you really powerful? So the more information that you're able to handle and decipher, the better knowledge you will have, which will increase the power to do something. So before I get into all of that, let's go ahead and get into this video I seen about the military industrial complex from the National Archives. But it's you'll see.
I come to you with a message of leave taking and farewell.
This speech did not get very much attention. When a new president is coming to power, as John Kennedy was, the spotlight was not on Dwight Eisenhower.
We have been compelled to create a permanent armaments industry of vast proportions.
There was a feeling at the time that this must have been written by some speechwriter who just sneaked into the speech.
In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
3 months ago, we got contacted by a family up in Minnesota saying that we have documents from Malcolm Moose. He was responsible in part for drafting the military-industrial complex speech.
These new papers give us written evidence that this was not just some caprice of Eisenhower's or something by some speechwriter.
You see the evolution of his speech from May 1959 to 1961.
And he wanted to give this speech for a long time, 2 years.
Our military organization today bears little relation to that known of any of my predecessors in peacetime, or indeed by the fighting men of World War II or Korea.
There was one person in Dwight Eisenhower's life whom he really confided almost everything to, and that was his brother Milton.
There's one particular document where the speechwriters had already drafted their version of the speech, only to see Milton come along and totally revamp what had already been written.
When Milton Eisenhower was taking notes and writing things on the drafts of these speeches, the speechwriters knew that it wasn't Milton talking, it was Ike.
The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist.
He would see magazines with advertisements for some new warplane or some bomb, and he got so angry he'd take the magazine and throw it into the fireplace of the Oval Office because he felt that defense spending should not be something that would be encouraged by companies who are seeking commercial gain.
We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes.
There is an interesting document. It shows that the farewell speech would be made to Congress. But yet, President Eisenhower decided no, he was going to address the people.
Only an alert and knowledgeable citizenry can compel the proper meshing of the huge industrial and military machinery of defense with our peaceful methods and goals, so that security and liberty may prosper together.
One test of how well a president speaks is how long the speech lives. Here we are 50 years later, we're still talking about this speech.
Now, on Friday noon, I am to become a private citizen. I am proud to do so. I look forward to it. Thank you, and good night.
And there you have it. So let's get a one-man team, my bad. Let's go ahead and bring this keynote up. Like I said, I'm limited in time. So please forgive me on my rash dissemination of information. It is a lot. I have about 20 slides, but I want to do at least a minute per slide. As you see here, we have NATO, the military industrial complex explained, command and control, globalism and the liberal world order. Now, you just saw that Eisenhower was not in agreement with what was going on. He understood people like Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, Boeing, all these defense contractors had different goals in mind, right? And he said we must guard against that. But how does that come about? By being an educated citizenry. Now, what happened with the quote unquote deep state, or as I grew up, the shadow government, you see that they control education. So therefore we're limited in the information, therefore hindering our knowledge. So let's get to the first slide. We have General Eisenhower, born 1890, passed away 1969. Now, as you see, he was the supreme commander of the Allied Expeditionary Force in Europe, and he was involved in Operation Torch. I mean, many of you guys may already be historians and buffs. I don't want to insult your intelligence, but I'm just giving you a connection to where I see that this military industrial complex merged with the Nazis, the ones that we're fighting against. And I have claimed to believe that these are the same people that we're fighting now, and as the slides progress, you'll start to see a connection. So I say NATO equals Nazism in a lot of forms, but we won't acknowledge that because we failed to guard against the infiltration of our military and our government by way of their command and control. So let's just keep it moving. Did you know that General Eisenhower was a West Point graduate alongside General Omar Bradley, who, in conjunction with Eisenhower being the first supreme commander of NATO, he was the first chairman of NATO. So they graduated at the same time in 1915 from West Point. So these are military-minded individuals that help to orchestrate a peace coalition per se in the time of peace after facing so much war. And what General Eisenhower was warning against is they will overtake this and bear down everything that he implemented for peace as a command and control operation through our economics, military, and our political system. Fun fact, he was elected president without ever holding a political office. He's not the only one, but the most recent one that we know of is Donald Trump. Now, he, as the supreme commander of the Allied Expeditionary Force, also termed NATO USA, North African Theater of Operations, from 1942 to 1945, he was the military governor of Germany, right, for 3 months from May to November of 1945. He was a president of Columbia University before he became president, and he was the 34th president and the first Republican to be elected president in 20 years. Now, don't worry, I'm not going to read all of this stuff to you guys. That's why I'm making the PDF available for you. But I do want to point out certain things within that. So if you see here, check out this logo. You see the flaming sword. This is the Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force. Excuse me. The first individual that you see right there is Omar Bradley, General, who was the chairman of NATO, the first one. Now, what predates NATO? Do you guys know? Do you guys know? No? Well, it's the Allies, right? So the Allies were fighting against the axis of power, which was Imperial Germany, excuse me, Nazi Germany, Imperial Japan, and why did I have a brain fart? Kingdom of Italy. There we go. So these were the three axis of powers. But what's funny is in 1929, the Vatican City became its own sovereign independent state or nation state. And in 1933, you had the Nazis, Nazi Germany, have an agreement with the Vatican City. We won't get too deep into that because there's a lot of questions. But what I wanted to show you here is we have what we call the Northern African Theater of Operations, or the Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force. There's a lot of acronyms that's going to be thrown around. Well, this is a new organization to the right of that. Same sword, same kind of background in the shield. Um, but what is that, you may ask? And read all of that for yourself, because it's interesting. But Shafe and the saucer, the Supreme Allied Commander, is very key to what's going on. Now, the U.S. Army Europe and Africa, which was formerly the North African Theater of Operations. Stick with me. I know it's a lot. As you see, it says 1942 to 2022. Well, what happened? Well, let's just highlight this real quick. Their motto is stronger together. Does this sound familiar? Well, we see this picture right here of this slide where you have Joe Biden campaigning for Hillary in 2016 with the stronger together in the background. That was her slogan. Now, if you know anything about Kosovo and Georgia, all of that stuff, and what it is to be allied or aligned in an ally with NATO. And we see this in the news recently, all the destruction, corruption, us funding wars that don't have anything to do with us. Well, it's pretty odd that this U.S. Army installation has the slogan, stronger together. Now, let's see what it is. It says United States Army Europe and Africa is an Army service component, command, theater, Army responsible for directing United States Army operations throughout the U.S. European Command and U.S. Africa Command, AFRICOM area. It said during the Cold War, it supervised ground formations primarily focused upon the Warsaw Pact, Nazis, to the east as part of NATO's Central Army Group. So when are we talking about? The Cold War, okay, also part of World War II. It says since the revolutions of 1989, it has greatly reduced its size, dispatched U.S. forces to the Gulf Wars of 90 and 91, and the 2003 invasion of Iraq, the Kosovo War, the war in Afghanistan from 2001 to 2021. And it says, and increase security operations with other NATO land forces. In 2020, the Army announced that United States Army Africa would consolidate with U.S. Army Europe to form a new command, U.S. Army Europe and Africa. The two commands were consolidated on November 20th, 2020. Now, I have to ask you guys, do you recall when Trump says that NATO needed to pay their fair share, and there was a rumor circulating that Trump wanted to pull out of NATO, right? And I want to believe that he would have, and I don't believe this is inside rhetoric. So when people talk about, oh, Trump says he's playing 5D chess, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. Okay, but I will tell you this, there's a lot of history that is starting to come to the front or the forefront of, what am I saying? Their manipulation, their operations are being able to be seen now, because if you did just a little bit of history, a little bit of connecting the dots, you will see that Eisenhower was warning against the very thing that we're funding in Ukraine right now. Ukraine wants to be a NATO ally and all this stuff. And we've seen the false flag of them saying that Russia threw a missile over into Poland off tops. I know that's fake, but why? They want to enact Article 5 as an attack on a NATO territory so they can get the full military backing of the United States. I believe that this this right here, U.S. Army Europe and Africa, aka NATO USA, or the Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force. Keep in mind, same logo, same insignia, same shield. Um, it is no secret that they were created in 1942, and they're saying that this same faction is still operating today. I would like to bring in my ultimate conspiracy theorist or theory and say that was January 6th a NATO ran operation, because backed by the FBI, backed by the CIA, because you'll see a lot of this interweaving as we move forward in these slides. And like I said, I don't want to keep you too long, but there's a lot of information, so I'm just trying to go fast. So right now we're talking about Shafe. We're about to talk about the Allies, aka United Nations. The Allies were United Kingdom, United States, Soviet Union, and China. Also, the big three and four, the four powers, or the four policemen of the United Nations. They are permanent members. Yeah, they have permanent membership of the UN Security Council. And like I say, read all these things on your own, do your own research. But this is the operations, or these are the operations that never went away. So you see, 1942, we was fighting against fascist Italy. Think about Fauci. Moving forward, it said before there was NATO and the EU, European Union, there was the Woo and the Voodoo and the Weu. I'm making up jokes now, but no, you have the Western Union, then you have the Western Union Defense Organization, then you have the Western European Union, and all of these proceeded what we have now as the European Union. And then when you look at voodoo and how they were really the precursors, not just to NATO, but the operation that we have now. So you, if you think World Economic Forum and all of that, United Nations, yeah, this is where all of that comes from. And then they compartmentalize different factions, so you never really know what the left hand or the right hand is doing in conjunction to these globalists moving forward in total global enslavement, as we witnessed with the COVID lockdowns. So moving to the next slide, we have um, NATO secret armies, Operation Gladio, and JFK. I encourage you to read all of this, but it says the first operation of the CIA was the rigging of the 1948 Italian elections, right? And then I got all of that highlighted. But over to the right, you see that is the actual declassified document where they petitioned to interfere with the the CIA petitioned to interfere with the Italian elections. And this was declassified in 2018 under Trump. But the way that they would rig this election was by way of coordination with the media, aka radio broadcast at the time. And it would be like a simulcast with coming from San Francisco um, to Italy, but it had to be coordinated exactly, right? It had to be. So what this made me think of was 9/11. Why did Building 7 fall after the announcer in the BBC said that it already had fallen, Building 7 at the World Trade Center? So we could see that there might have been an element of the same type of operation. So we want to complain and say, oh, our elections are rigged or blah, blah, blah. Well, yeah, you better believe it. And if we can identify the FBI and CIA as a part of this operation, we'll understand that they're rogue. And that's what Operation Gladio pretty much was a whole bunch of stay behind networks. And they were investigated in 1975 about this with the Rockefeller Commission. And like I say, there's a lot in here. I'm just giving you surface level information, but I do have that link at theblackvault.com, so you can look at all those declassified um, documents on your own. And then how would they do it? By saying that there were insurrectionists and they were extremists, but really they're just NATO CIA created factions. And I have reason to believe that January 6th was definitely a NATO operation. And if not NATO, then you see the consolidation on November 20, 2020 of the Supreme headquarters. I mean, obviously, they say they disbanded in 1945, but they're using the same insignia, same logo, different colors, which leads me to believe it's the same outfit, same theater of operations. But you look at Miss Cheney, Liz Cheney, well, her dad, Dick Cheney, was somebody who petitioned the Rockefeller Commission in General Ford during 1975 when CIA was being investigated to not disclose 89 pages that basically pinpointed that yes, you guys broke the law. But because they are NATO, it was okay. And so here's the NATO operations handbook. I have a link for that as well. I would definitely look into that because here we're talking about hierarchies and the command and control of military operations and how they're conducted and which areas they're conducted in, right? And so I read this thing, it's about 120 pages or so. This was released July 1st, 2015. Funny thing, right after, or well, not right after, but during the same period that Russia went into Crimea. So if Putin is saying, "Hey, you guys are keep encroaching on our borders," well, nobody has been yet to explain to me why the U.S. is funding bioweapons in Ukraine. So you know, is Putin over paranoid? Well, no, they just said that the Russians tried to launch missiles over into Poland. Somebody here is crazy. And I know one thing, somebody also is lying. So this is SHAPE. SHAPE stands for the Supreme Headquarters of Aligned Powers. Well, let's just see, because there we go. Supreme Headquarters, Allied Powers, Europe. The first two gentlemen were um, basically the supreme commander under Trump. This last one, his name is Christopher G. Gavalli or whatever. And he lives basically over there in Belgium, so far removed from whatever happens in America. But my point is this: these are the people that's running operations. This is the same faction that Eisenhower was warning us, the American people, about. Now, it might have been many, many generations ago, but how is it that we're still under the same attacks, same command and control operations that General Eisenhower was warning us against? See, it's not necessarily that he was for it, but as we get into it, you'll start to see some things. You'll start to see some things. So right here we have the chair of the military, of NATO Military Committee. So let me go back real quick. So the Supreme Headquarters Allied Powers are the saucer. The Supreme Headquarters, let me see. What is it? He's the commander. Just say Supreme Commander. They got all these stupid acronyms. My point is, this guy is the second highest office in the military NATO committee structure. Now, the chair or the chairman of NATO military committee is the highest. So there's only one person above the supreme commander, and that is the chairman of the Joint Chief of Staffs for the NATO military committee. Now, as I mentioned earlier, Omar Bradley was the first chairman of NATO, right? And this is the current I guess, chairman right now, Rob Burr from, I forgot where he was from. It does matter, but you guys look it up on your own. Because like I said, I'm just giving you a baseline overview of how what happened then is still happening now, and nobody took heed to Eisenhower's warning. So this is Adolf Hausinger, who also became the chief of staff of NATO. I believe it was from 1961 to 1964. Pop quiz. What year was President Kennedy assassinated? Okay, we'll come back to that. Everybody knows. What month? See, what day? Oh, now you're starting to see some things. November 20, 2022, or excuse me, 2020. Remember that. What reshaped. So it says, did you know that Adolf Hausinger was Hitler's chief of staff that would later become NATO's chief of staff? What a coincidence. And I found some of this information on the Jewish Virtual Library because he's an important person in their world that shaped history. It was a joke. So here we see these current troops from I believe this was like 2014 2015 during the Crimea annexation by Russia. You see NATO, you see the Azov Battalion insignia, and lo and behold, there's a Nazi symbol. So command and control, man. So here we go. NATO's Nazi chairman, Adolf Brun Heinrich Ernst Hausinger or whatever. So interesting thing about him is he was part of the the German military through the German Empire, the Weimar Republic, Nazi Germany, and West Germany. Right? So that's just funny. So like I say, from chairman of NATO Military Committee from 1961 to 1964. I do have more information on him, but there's a link below. Go ahead and read about his life and his career. Well, this is not a conspiracy, it's just a coincidence. Lehman Leitzenzer was also chief of staff in the army. He was also the chief of the NATO Military Committee, and he was also the supreme allied commander from 1963 to 1969. So what was I don't know. There's so many places I could go from here, but he was appointed by General Ford in 1975 to go ahead and um, basically sign off and investigate with the Rockefeller Commission. Did the CIA do anything wrong? Right now, I know you're wondering, like, well, what's the CIA got to do with all of this? Well, they're all tied in together. And once you get into Allen Dulles, you'll start to see a pure connection of how Allen Dulles really negotiated the surrendering of the Nazi fascists in Italy. And we all know about Project Paperclip, where we absorbed a lot of Nazi scientists, but we also absorbed a lot of their generals and military minded people. So all I'm saying is we're living through the same tyranny that we were aligned to be fighting. So um it's really disturbing, to say the least. There is an interesting point in here, but nevertheless, remember in 1975 he was supposed to be also investigating the assassination of JFK. So am I saying that these factions had anything to do with it? I wouldn't go that far, but let's just say that Kennedy refused to endorse Operations Northwood and then fired this guy as chief of staff 3 days later. And later on in that year, he became the chairman of NATO Military Committee. You go figure. It's not a conspiracy. It's just a coincidence. Oh yeah. Sidebar. He was also present in Operation Sunrise, which was done by Nazi General Karl Wolff and Allen Dulles of the OSS at the time, to basically secretly absorb some of these Nazis, in 1945. So this is prior to the CIA, which we had the OSS. This guy was part of the negotiations of their surrender and ultimately the absorbing of Nazis. So we're streamlining to today, right now, current events. So currently, the chairman of the Joint Chief of Staffs is General Milley. Oh wow, he was also the chief of joint or chairman during Trump's era. So no matter what you and I may think about the elections and how they were stolen or not stolen, or the just say the breaking of the social contract, breach of trust, um, just misusage of our military, he's not standing up for them. And you'll say, well, why isn't he? Well, because he's part of NATO. And you're like, is he really? Yes, he was one of the generals for the International Security Assistance Force Joint Command over there in Afghanistan. So we see right here a picture of Secretary of Defense Austin, Joint Base Commander Scott Miller, General Miller, that is, and then Milley in the background. Now we know the atrocity that the pulling out of our troops was, but if you really, when you really look into it, NATO pulled their troops out, and that's what we're about to get into right now. Read all this on your own. I don't want to keep you. Respect your time and your intelligence. So we fight and die for NATO. It says the International Security Assistance Force. Okay, read all that, but we'll drop down to the highlighted part. In 2003, NATO took command of the mission at the request of the United Nations and Afghan government, making its first deployment outside of Europe and North America. Shortly thereafter, the UN Security Council expanded ISAF's mission to provide and maintain security beyond the capital region. So, as you see, we sent our boys and women and over to Afghanistan from 2001 to 2014, but we was really fighting for NATO since 2003. Now, I wonder if you all recall, because like I said, I've, unbeknownst to me, been researching these Nazis my whole life. I read Mein Kampf when I was 14 years old, and the way I thought about it is you got to know your enemy in order to defeat them. So I'm 41 now. Think about the reversal of the numbers, and I'm on to you guys. I've always had you in my scope. I just didn't know what I was going to one shot, one kill. And we're talking about information. So this is all politically, but information is the part of informal warfare that we're fighting against, because you've lied to us with a straight face for so long. So remember when Bush pulled out, a lot of people miss this, maybe you don't, but we stopped looking for weapons of mass destruction in Iraq within the first year, or shortly after 1 year of looking. And I found that always to be odd. Like, but we're over there, but we're still over there. Not now, but we were over there looking for weapons of mass destruction. So while the rest of the public thought we were looking for weapons of mass destruction, Bush called that search off. And I want to say around 2003, if I'm not mistaken. So with that, what are we talking about? Well, is that because the uh, I was going to say United Nations, but yeah, the Security Council by way of NATO went ahead and took over the operation. So what are we saying? NATO is the army of the UN. We're not going to be fighting blue helmets. We're already at war. But let's just say the ISAF was replaced in 2014 with the RSM or whatever. Let me see. And that is, let me go back. My bad. Resolution Support Mission. There we go. So oh man, I got my stinking logo right there so you can't see it. But anyway, just read the highlighted part. Go to Wikipedia yourself, look it up too. Um, you could see that they were there right shortly after the ISAF, which General Milley helped to command, which made him part of a NATO joint command. We know this stuff. And then you see over here in this picture, John Kerry addressing the support mission over there in Kabul at the headquarters. And you just think about that. So it says on April 14th, 2021, via North Atlantic Council ministerial statement, NATO announced a drawdown of RSM troops by the 1st of May, and the mission was terminated early September 2021. The last RSM troop was a U.S. troop, which withdrawn on August 30th, 2021. Now we know that big old debacle, how we left people there. Well, now you see that your boys, your women, your fighters, your soldiers from the American faction of this joint alliance, many were left out to dry. But this was a NATO mission all along. So while we're blaming President Biden, like, oh, this destruction, it's a dastardly pullout, blah blah blah. So not too much oversight. Well, he didn't really have much say in the matter because this was a NATO command and control operation. Do you guys get it now? So all those billions of dollars of weapons, did they really get taken over by the Taliban, which we helped create or whatever? We ain't going to go there with all that. My father-in-law, special forces, he trained Timothy Osman. Okay, so yeah, look that up and get back with me. So fighting the spit nets and all that over there in Afghanistan, way in the 70s, man. You guys, like, history is so key, and we will be doomed if we don't study it because it is repeating itself. Now, long and short of that is, so we're over here with all this billions of dollars of equipment. Did it go to the Taliban or did it go to NATO? Is this the black market weapons that they're trying to shoot down Russian planes with and saying that they went over to Poland? I mean, like, it's about to get real serious real fast. But do you realize where's all that equipment? Where's all those weapons? Are you going to tell me that we really didn't destroy that? We know war. So I think that NATO has it. It's just part of their alliance with us. Um, This is available on Band.video. It's called The American Hunter Part 1 on the Titans of Liberty channel. It's a docu-memo that I put together, just validating and backing some of this. What's the word I want to use? Some of the research, some of the connections that I see with Ukraine, Nazism, and NATO, right? Because and also January 6th, like you are setting us up, but you guys have been working with Nazis for a long time, longer than I've been alive. And beyond that, what kind of agreements do you have with these stay behind networks where now it's the next generation? You know what I mean? So in 1945, we absorbed a whole bunch of Nazis. We thought just scientifically, well, we did that militarily now as well. So if we had in 1961 to 1964 a literal Nazi as the chairman of NATO, why would I want any alliance or allegiance or anything to do with a bunch of Nazis? I don't. I don't. So we need to pull out of NATO because, as far as I can see, NATO is a bunch of Nazis that has infiltrated America, and they sit on our political boards. They sit on the boards of companies. They're the ones that's making these laws that need to take your rights away, and we're just in one big open air concentration camp. And what are they telling you? Well, you're going to need this to travel. I need to see this. Put a mask on, blah, blah, blah. Just like you did the Jews. Just like you did the Jews. Well, this time it's not a gas chamber. It's called the COVID shot. Sorry, get a little passionate. So here's Alan Dulles. I ain't getting into this, man. I'm almost done with your time, and I thank you very much because we've already been going 35 minutes. But this is available for you. Make your own podcast. Take the PDF, do whatever you want with it. Just share it. Just tell people that we are in the middle of not just a CIA takeover, but we are in the middle of a NATO operation, and they're calling us insurrectionists and terrorists and all this other stuff because we are we're isolationists, if you want to call it that, and we're not interventionists. See, NATO is a bunch of interventionists, but I need to know, why is the CIA and the Nazis so well connected, and why is NATO allowing Nazis to be the chairman when we're orchestrated for peace? Oh, that's right. Watch the beginning of the video. Eisenhower warned us against this. We just fell asleep. We were entertained to death. You see, we believe the propaganda. Look at this right here. This guy, Alan Dulles, former CIA director, was a lawyer with Sullivan Cromwell. You've heard that name lately? You've heard of FTX, right? FTX. Well, Sullivan and Cromwell is a law firm out of New York that was helping back FTX. Oh, wow. You're telling me that one of their partners was a CIA director back in the day? Well, yeah, in 1933. Remember that year I brought up. This guy Dulles was meeting with a bunch of Nazis. Let's see. He met with Mussolini. He met with Hitler. Let's go down to that last paragraph. It said during the late 1920s and early 1930s, he served as legal advisor to the delegations of arms limitation at the League of Nations. There he had the opportunity to meet with Hitler, Mussolini, Soviet Minister Maxim Leonov, and the leaders of Britain and France. It says in April 1933, Dulles and Norman Davis met with Hitler in Berlin on State Department duty. After the meeting, Dulles wrote to the brother Foster, John Foster Dulles, that is, reassuring him that that the conditions under Hitler's regime, quote, are not quite as bad, end quote, as an alarmist friend had indicated. So uh look at this, go down to the last, not the last line, but right there where it says, after meeting with Nazi propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels, Dulles stated he was impressed with him, citing his, quote, sincerity and frankness during the interactions. It says 1935, Dulles returned from a business trip to Germany, uh concerned by the Nazi treatment of German Jews, and despite his brother's objections, led a movement within the law firm of Sullivan and Cromwell to close their Berlin office. As a result of Dulles's efforts, the Berlin office was closed and the firm ceased to conduct business with Nazi Germany. So they say. We're coming to the end of these slides. Yep, that is it. So research Alan Dulles. That is back there. I got the link right there in the middle. Look that up, get into detail because that's the CIA Nazi connection, and it's still going on. And Nancy Pelosi, remember when she was talking all that trash about Trump? Um, we're going to pull him out of the office by his hair, blah, blah, blah. Well, she was bold to do that because you had NATO General Milley right there on the side that was willing to make it happen, didn't want to investigate. So you're wondering why certain things didn't happen. I hope this brief expose, like I say, of information leads you to a powerful resolution that is truly orchestrated in the attempts of catching peace and maintaining peace, right? Because right now, NATO has waged a war on us. And you can't say that there were not paramilitary looking people on January 6th. And I believe that their big warm up was the things that they did in Crimea against Russia. So I'm not a Russian sympathizer, empathizer, whatever, but I know one thing. Putin said, I'm fighting Nazis. That's it. You know what I mean? We could say he's a bad guy, ex-KGB. You should be fighting Nazis too. But if you ask me, I think they're all aligned, and nothing is greater than we the people, except for the almighty creator of the whole universe. So if we the people can be the people of the almighty creator, meaning he is our God and we are his people. In other words, like I stopped at the hate.com, David Summerall says, we need to be the people. So I tell you, take this information, take this PDF, spread it far and wide, make your own rendition, add more, take away. I don't care what you do with it, but I'm telling you, wake up. Wake up, because this is not a game. It is informal warfare, and you need information as your bullets. And if you don't see history repeating itself, it will be too late. It will be too late. So I hope that God graces you with his love, his forgiveness, his mercy, his grace, and that we can all be strong in this fight, and that we know that we can rely on him and his word. Um, Outside of that, take this, be the change, and be the people. Peace and blessings. I've been watching Informal Warfare. This has been NATO, Command and Control of America. Peace and blessings. Shout out Jason Lowe, Titans of Liberty.